In this video, I'm talking about something called the present perfect. But remember, this is a title that we use for this part of the grammar, but we're really talking about past actions. This part of the grammar is called the present perfect, but the action is really something that happened in the past. And we'll look at why we use this word present to talk about a past action. Let's see. First, let's look at a formula. This is a basic formula you can use to recognize the present perfect or to create it. There are two things that form the base of the present perfect: the verb have and a past participle. And I'm just going to write the word participle here to make it easier to remember. But it's the word have, the verb have, and a past participle. Now, let's look at the word have. This verb in the third person could be has. So you could say, I have, we have, they have, you have, or he has, she has, it has. Just like our normal verb rules for the third person, we have the S. We're going to follow that when we're using this verb here. And then we also have a participle, a past participle. Now, for past participles, if it's a regular verb, it should look like the past tense form of the verb, the simple past, by adding two letters, ed. So a verb like walk becomes walked. A verb like talk becomes talked. Those are our regular verbs. If they are regular in the past, they are probably regular also as a past participle. Where it becomes a little more tricky are for our irregular verbs. There are irregular verbs in other languages. For example, in Spanish, the verb romper in its participle form is irregular, roto. The pattern would suggest it should be rompido, but it's an irregular. Instead of rompido, instead of following the pattern, it's roto. In English, we have a long list of irregulars. So in Spanish, there's a short list. There are some irregulars. In English, it's a very long list. And it's one way that even people who live in the United States, who speak English all of their life, make mistakes sometimes within this language and break the rules. Well, to learn those irregulars, I have two big suggestions. One, find a list. Find a list of irregular verbs. You can go on Google. You can find videos that talk about irregular verbs, and they usually show the infinitive, the base form, the simple past form, and the past participle to compare the different forms of these irregulars. For example, the verb go, simple past, went, participle, gone. Okay? Or a verb like eat, simple past, ate, participle, eaten. There's not a clear pattern. They are irregular. So I would say find a list, and then you could look at your list. You could see your list. Or you could memorize them. That's the number one option there. Trying to memorize those irregular verbs. Some ways you could do that. Maybe when you're in the grocery store waiting in line to pay, you could look at 5 irregular verbs while you wait and try to memorize just those 5. Or maybe when you're waiting to pick up your children from school, you could look at another 5 and try to memorize those 5 irregular verbs. But we'll need these two things: have or has, and a past participle. Now, something to remember is that this verb have is not the verb tener. Okay? The verb have in English is actually a combination of two different verbs that you would see in Spanish. Tener, but it's not tener in this case. It's actually this verb, haber. You can think of that when you're creating this part of the grammar. Haber. So this would be something like he comido, has comido, ha comido, hemos comido. Okay? Those examples. Haber is what we're looking at and thinking for have or has if you're a Spanish speaker. And this is one place in which Spanish and English are actually very similar. There are times in which English and Spanish do not line up, but this is almost word for word a parallel between the two languages. We have haber, have or has, participle, which in Spanish you would have your ido or ado or some irregular to create that form. This is the formula. Next, we will talk about why we use the present perfect.